Good evening. I'm a rising sophomore and rabble-rouser at Chatham University, and I have some feedback for the documents the EPA has put forth regarding stakeholder input. With respect to the study's proposed criteria, I want to urge special vigilance in the realm of management of wastewater and residuals in Table 1 of the document addressing selection of case studies. To my knowledge, there are no underground injection control wells in the state of Pennsylvania, so they are currently not an option for wastewater storage. Will it be possible to dilute the frac water to a safe consistency once it has been exhausted? Essentially, I would like to see part of the study dedicated to the effect recycling has on frac water. If more chemicals are added to the fluid each time a well is drilled, the water must become increasingly concentrated with chemicals like benzene and cyanide. I'm aware that recycling makes sense on a practical level, but I'm skeptical about public health issues associated with the life cycle of the water. These concerns all fall under this section of Table 1 that I named previously. This natural gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale region has pinned me with a sense of urgency, and I see it when I look around rooms like this, full of homeowners, citizens, families, and humans, and we all have a stake as those who drink water. It angers me that this industry is moving forward exempt from federal regulations like the Clean Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act, and without the completion of this study. I feel shame and disappointment when I look to the flat mountaintops of West Virginia where I am from, and I do not want to feel the same shame when I look at this portion of Appalachia in a few years from here. And I also wanted to recommend the use of case studies that address sites with abandoned underground coal mines, as those areas may be particularly sensitive of fracking. So please do your job well with this study. Thank you.
The mission of the EPA is to protect human health and to safeguard the natural environment, air, water, and land, upon which life depends. The current practices used in the hydraulic fracturing process to harvest natural gas from the Marcellus shale bed underlying Pennsylvania and several of its neighboring states is affecting our environment, our air, our land, and most especially our water. Southwestern Pennsylvania is a water-rich area, but we cannot sustain the withdrawal of 4 million gallons of clean water for every fracking well for very long without eventually running out. Our state and local governments are not properly regulating the process or even properly enforcing current regulations to protect our water, and they often cite the economic upside of the industry as justification. We strongly urge the EPA to stay true to its mission and evaluate the process on environmental effects regardless of the economics. We believe that the economic benefits will still be attainable with proper environmental regulation, but that the environment must be protected through regulation, as the industry will not self-regulate properly and will always put economics first. There is no economic justification for any adverse effects on our environment, and we are relying on the EPA to fulfill its mission to safeguard our natural environment by regulating the hydraulic fracturing process, including issuing a moratorium on the process until proper safeguards have been put in place. To allow the practice to continue virtually unchecked while the research is being conducted can only result in a failure to your mission, to our environment, to our air, our land, our water, and our future. And the economics of that situation is clearly unaffordable.
I'd like to remind the panel that environmental laws are human health laws. They are placed to protect human health foremost and utmost. As such, as you begin your study, I urge you to consider a conceptual site model of all inputs and outputs from these sites through all potential vectors. We've heard earlier about cattle being poisoned, about deer. There are already fish advisories in the state to avoid eating certain varieties of fish because of legacy pollution. It's imperative that as you design the study, you consider every way in which human health may be affected through inhalation, ingestion, and other exposures to these toxic chemicals. I also urge the EPA to consider developing causal models that attorneys, that people, that citizens can use to protect themselves. Currently in Pennsylvania, if you are outside of 1,000 feet from a wellhead, you are on your own in a court of law to prove contamination. That is unacceptable given the potential, the size, the depth, the enormous construction that these wells contain. Lastly, I believe the EPA should study Pennsylvania because of the fact that we have higher rural population than any other state, and that we have over 1 million drinking water wells across the state, that to adequately protect Pennsylvanians, you need to be here and help us fight for what action is going on in these communities. You asked for knowledge gaps, things that we've heard from community members so far. People are very concerned about 150 years of extractive industries already coming through this state. The Drake well, oil, gas, coal have been extracted for many years. Those underground activities, how they might affect new, deeper activities. Casing construction has been a concern for many people. The toxicity of the mixtures, not the individual compounds themselves, and how they may affect individuals or interact with each other, and seasonal flows and chemical variations that happen naturally, how that may affect the fracturing process and their procedures to keep Pennsylvanians safe.
Good evening. Clean Water Action's been working here in Pittsburgh for over 25 years, and we have over 150,000 members here in Pennsylvania. We're very concerned about the situation going on with the rush to drill natural gas in the Marcellus Shale. We are very pleased to see that EPA is doing this investigation, and we urge EPA to do as thorough a job as possible. We are most concerned about, in terms of the scope of the investigation, that EPA not act too narrowly in terms of looking too specifically at the fracturing moment of the gas extraction process itself, but that there needs to be a look at the whole process of extracting natural gas from these deep shales. So that, for example, if there is a problem with cementing or casing of a well, that can have both environmental, public health, water impacts. That if there is a problem with the frac pit that's associated with the well pad, that is going to have environmental and public health and water impacts. And that if there is a problem with the wastewater that is generated from the gas well, that could have impacts. And this is something which I think you've been hearing about a lot of potential case studies that you can do here in Pennsylvania or here in this part of the Marcellus Shale. And I think that there's actually, it's not just these individual cases you're hearing about, but if you look at DEP records, just in 2010 they found 500 violations at Marcellus well sites. 1 in 7 well sites had violations, and 10 of these had improper cementing and casings. 80 of these had frac pit violations, 80 of them had improper disposal of the wastewater or hazardous waste, and 115 had frac pit violations. So we're talking about leaking frac pits or improper construction of frac pits. Those are serious, they need to be looked at and investigated by EPA.
Contrary to popular misconception, this is neither a new technology nor a controversial process for the last few years. The controversy is one based on media-generated public hysteria and perception, not science, fact, or evidence. The evidence is quite the contrary. Every state agency regulating oil and gas operations in the nation has been on record saying they have no firm evidence of any well anywhere in the nation that an instance where the process of hydraulic fracturing has had negative environmental impact on groundwater. EPA has conducted a prior study during the Clinton administration on coal bed methane fracturing. Coal bed methane is quite a bit shallower than the shale wells we're drilling, yet even in that case, it was very close to the groundwater. There was no indication that there was any damage done. As far as developing a case study, particularly this investigation, it would seem that with over 1 million hydraulically fractured wells nationwide, we have a huge data source already available to file to state agencies regulating oil and gas. The first phase of this process is to review those files, carefully review all related complaints, review how the state investigated those complaints, report on the validity of the complaints and methodology of complaints for investigation. Secondary is the comparison of any surface discharge complaints or leak and fluid complaints reported to have an impact on water supplies. It would seem that many of the concerns raised about such discharges don't address similar sources such as traffic accidents, industrial discharges, and the release of common household products to the environment through public sewage discharges.